There comes a moment in your life when the silence becomes louder than the noise, when your tears become more honest than your words. And in that moment, hear me, you must learn the value of not telling people your problem. Not because you're hiding, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. See, some people don't really want to help you. They just want to know. They want to carry the scent of your struggle so they can whisper it in rooms you've never stepped in. Be careful, because some folks will pray for you with one hand and poison you with the other. There are some battles that demand privacy. Not everything needs a platform. Sometimes God closes the ears of the world so he can open the heavens to your cry. You think you need comfort from people, but what you really need is clarity from God. You don't need another conversation that leads nowhere. You don't need another opinion that dilutes your faith. What you need is presence. His presence. Let me tell you something. Your problem is not your identity. Stop rehearsing your pain to people who can't fix it. Stop giving CPR to relationships that died at the first sign of your vulnerability. If they left when it got hard, they were never meant to carry your burden. Sometimes silence is your strongest shield. You're not broken, you're becoming. And becoming takes pressure. It takes fire. It takes those nights when nobody knows what you're going through but God. You don't need to announce every tear, every trial, every disappointment. Sometimes your silence is your strategy. It is not denial, it is divine. And I hear the Spirit saying, stop explaining yourself to people who were never assigned to your journey. They weren't there when you cried yourself to sleep. They weren't there when you almost gave up. So why do they get access to the testimony before they respected the test? Hear me, it's not that you're alone. It's that you're being anointed in isolation. God is setting you apart, not setting you aside. And when he brings you out, you won't need to tell your story. They'll see it in your walk, feel it in your words, and witness it in your win. So hold your peace, keep your posture, and walk through this season not telling everyone about your problem, but telling your problem about your God. Your silence isn't weakness, it's warfare. And you're winning. Everyone listens, but not everyone cares. Be careful who you confide in. This is not about being bitter or building walls. It's about learning how to protect what's sacred within you. In a world full of noise and opinions, not every listening ear is a loving heart. There are people who will nod their heads while you pour your heart out, but they are not catching your tears. They're collecting your words. They are not leaning in to understand you. They're leaning in to examine you. And the tragedy is, some of the people who claim to care are only present for the drama, not the healing. There's a difference between someone who listens to help you grow and someone who listens just to have something to say about you later. This is why discernment is so critical in moments of vulnerability. When you're hurting, you often crave connection. You want someone to hear you, to validate your pain, to hold space for your brokenness. But what you must realize is that your pain is currency. And not everyone deserves to be paid in it. When you speak from a place of weakness to the wrong people, you give them access to your wounds. And some people don't know how to handle open wounds. They poke them, they press on them, they even speak over them with judgment instead of grace. It's easy to assume that a familiar face means a trustworthy heart. But many have learned the hard way that the ones closest to you can sometimes be the ones who weaponize your story. Just because someone is around doesn't mean they're aligned, and just because they say, I'm here for you, doesn't mean they have the capacity or the character to hold what you're carrying. This is not to say you shouldn't share, but you must be wise about who you share with. Not everyone is equipped to handle the weight of your truth. Some people are only equipped to gossip, to assume, or to project their own issues onto yours. And here's the painful reality. Some people don't care about your healing, they just care about your details. They want to know what happened, not so they can help you overcome, but so they can have something to talk about in their own broken circles. You may think you're confiding in a friend, but you're really feeding a conversation you were never meant to be a part of. When you're in a vulnerable place, you are fertile ground, and whatever's planted into you, whether it's doubt, fear, judgment, or hope, will begin to grow. So why let someone plant weeds in the soil of your soul? You've got to guard your spirit. You've got to protect your process. Healing is not just about recovery, it's about stewardship. How are you stewarding your experiences? Are you giving them away too quickly? Are you sharing the sacred before it has been sealed? Are you letting people in who have no business being that close to your brokenness? You need to treat your soul like a sanctuary. Not everyone should be allowed to walk freely in and out of the sacred spaces of your heart. Because every time you share, you're not just speaking, you're trusting, and misplaced trust can leave you more wounded than the initial pain itself. So the next time you feel the urge to tell someone everything you're going through, pause. Ask yourself if they're really listening for you or if they're listening for them. Are they present to heal or present to hear and disappear? Not everyone has earned access to your truth. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your struggle. Some things are meant to be whispered in prayer, not shouted in conversation. Because everyone listens, but not everyone truly cares. Some people feed on your weakness. Your silence can protect your strength. There is a power in keeping quiet that many never learn because they are too eager to be understood, too desperate to explain, too broken to sit still. But silence is not just absence of words. It is a shield, a strategy, a spiritual defense against those who see your struggle as an opportunity. The truth is, not everyone is qualified to witness your vulnerability. Some people do not come into your life to uplift. They come to observe, to analyze, and to exploit. There are individuals who don't feel secure unless they see you insecure. They thrive off the sight of you broken, unsure, doubting yourself. Your tears become entertainment. Your fears become ammunition. And the moment you expose your pain, they begin to reposition themselves, not to comfort you, but to control the narrative around you. Your weakness becomes their leverage. Your honesty becomes their headline. And before you know it, what you meant as a cry for help becomes the subject of discussion behind your back. This is why your silence can be more powerful than your explanation. Because the moment you open up to the wrong person, you give them a window into your process. And when people see that you're not as strong as they thought, they either step back or they step on you. It's not that you're too sensitive. It's that you've been too trusting. You believed they cared. You assumed they were safe. But all along, they were waiting to see the cracks, waiting to see the struggle, waiting to use your pain as proof that you're not who you say you are. But when you choose to stay silent, when you choose to carry your burden without broadcasting it, you strip the enemy of power. You don't give them a weapon to use against you. You don't feed their gossip. You don't give them material. And in that silence, you begin to hear something deeper. You begin to hear the stillness of wisdom, the guidance of discernment, the strength that doesn't need applause to feel real. Silence becomes your covering, your boundary, your wisdom in motion. There are people who smile in your face and hope you fall behind your back, not because you did anything wrong, but because your existence challenges their comfort. And when they see you weak, it gives them peace. Because now, you're not as much of a threat. You're no longer the one they envy. You become easier to handle, easier to dismiss. That's why silence is not just wise, it's necessary. Because the moment you let them know you're struggling, they stop seeing you as a human and start seeing you as a story. It's hard to accept, but not every relationship is rooted in love. Some are rooted in power, and when you hand someone your weakness, you hand them control. They may never say it out loud, but inside they feel taller when you feel small. They feel secure when you feel unstable. And your openness, instead of drawing them closer, gives them permission to create distance. So what do? You learn to protect your strength by staying quiet in seasons when people only want access, not accountability. You learn to stop answering questions that don't come from care. You stop explaining yourself to those who are only asking so they can go tell. You start treating your struggle as something holy, not something public. Because the truth is, some people will never love you whole They only know how to connect with you when you're hurting. They don't know what to do with a strong you, a healed you, a rising you. So instead of revealing your wounds, you start covering them with wisdom. God hears what man misunderstands. Talk to him first. There is a place in the soul where words fail and only the Spirit can translate. That place of deep sorrow, of quiet confusion, of emotional exhaustion is not always meant to be shared with human ears. Because people, though well-meaning, are limited. They interpret your pain through their own lens. They hear your words but miss your heart. They respond to what you said but don't understand what you meant. And in that miscommunication, you often find yourself more wounded, more misunderstood, more alone than you were before you opened your mouth. But when you go to God first, there's no need for translation. You don't have to defend your emotions or justify your tears. He sees the thought before it forms, the ache before it aches, the cry before it leaves your throat. His understanding is not built on what you say, it's built on who you are. He doesn't need context, background, or explanation. You don't have to fear judgment or misinterpretation. You don't have to explain why you're still struggling, still doubting, still afraid. He already knows, and he loves you anyway. There is a weight that only God can carry, and too often we place it in the hands of people who were never designed to hold it. We call a friend before we call on heaven. We text someone instead of turning to prayer, and we wonder why we feel even more empty after the conversation is over. It's because we went to man for something only God can give: peace, clarity, reassurance, direction. People can comfort you temporarily, but God can transform you eternally. People can nod their heads and say, I understand, but only God can step into the situation and shift the atmosphere around you. Sometimes it's not that others don't want to help, it's that they simply can't. They haven't walked in your shoes. They don't carry your calling. They don't battle your demons. They can only go as far as their experience and empathy allow. But when you talk to God, you're speaking to the one who wrote your story, the one who knows the next chapter before you've even turned the page. He's not surprised by your weakness. He's not disappointed by your struggle. He's not intimidated by your silence. He waits for you not to perform, but to be real. And when you're real with him, healing begins. There's a comfort in knowing that when no one understands, God still listens. When people offer quick advice or empty cliches, God offers presence. When people walk away because your emotions are too much, God stays because he sees the root beneath the reaction. You are never too broken for him, never too far gone, never too messy. And when you bring your problem to him first, he will show you how to carry it, how to process it, how to grow from it, and when to speak about it, if ever. The mistake many make is seeking validation before revelation. They want someone to say, you're right, instead of waiting for God to say, here's what's next. But God doesn't just validate, he guides. He doesn't just sympathize, he sanctifies. You don't need a crowd when you have connection. You don't need confirmation from man when you have communication with God. He is not waiting on your perfection, he is waiting on your presence. And the moment you speak to him, the silence that once felt heavy becomes holy. The confusion that once clouded your mind begins to clear. Because while others are still trying to figure you out, he already has the solution in his hand. People will use your pain as entertainment, but God uses it as elevation. There is a sacredness to suffering that is often lost when you hand it over to the wrong audience. In the hunger for relief, you may start looking for someone, anyone, to witness your agony, to see your bleeding heart, to validate your struggle. But what you often find instead are spectators, not supporters. They're not leaning in to carry the burden, they're leaning in to feed their curiosity. They don't ask how you're doing because they care. They ask because they crave details. And the more dramatic the story, the more excited they become. There's a certain darkness in the human heart that secretly rejoices when others are down. Misery loves company, but gossip loves tragedy. And when you expose your hardship to people who have not been called to your process, you become a character in their narrative instead of the hero in your own. You become a topic of discussion at tables you were never meant to sit at. They don't see the cost behind your tears. They see an opportunity to compare, to criticize, or to feel better about their own broken places. That's why you must be careful not to bleed where people are only there to watch, not to heal. But God is not like man. When you bring your pain to Him, He doesn't make it public. He makes it purposeful. What people mock, God uses as momentum. What they discuss, He transforms. Every tear you cried in secret, He collected. Every night you couldn't sleep, He counted. While others turned your pain into whispers and laughter, He was turning it into wisdom and strength. That broken heart, that betrayal, that loss, that disappointment, it all becomes material in His hands, raw material for a testimony, for a rise, for a transformation that cannot be undone. Elevation is often born in isolation. Before God lifts you, He separates you. He'll pull you away from people who only knew you through the lens of your struggle, so they won't contaminate the glory of your becoming. That's why some doors closed. That's why some relationships fell apart. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. He saw the people you trusted laughing behind your back. He saw the conversations you were left out of, the text messages that weren't meant for your eyes. And instead of letting you break down further, He broke you away. People will see your pain as weakness, but God sees it as potential. He knows how to take what crushed you and make it the cornerstone of your calling. He knows how to use the betrayal to make you bold. He knows how to use the tears to increase your capacity. He knows how to let rejection refine your voice, so when you speak it comes with weight. You weren't crying for nothing. You weren't breaking down for no reason. Every ounce of pain had a purpose, and while others may never understand it, God never wastes it. You need to stop looking for sympathy from those who lack sensitivity. Some people are spiritually numb. They can't feel the weight of your warfare. They can't comprehend what it took for you to get out of bed this morning, to smile when your heart was shattered, to believe again when everything in you wanted to give up. So when they hear your story, they don't respond with compassion. They respond with critique or indifference. That's not the kind of soil you want to plant your pain in, because the fruit you'll get is bitterness, shame, and regret. Instead, take your pain to the secret place. Take it to the one who can turn ashes into beauty. Let Him turn what was supposed to break you into the very thing that builds you. Don't let the opinions of small-minded people shrink the size of your journey. They didn't see the nights you didn't speak. They didn't feel the internal storms. They didn't battle the silent war in your mind. And because they didn't go through it, they don't get to label it. They don't get to mock what God is still molding. They don't get to laugh at what heaven is about to lift. They see your pain as something to laugh at, but God sees it as the platform for your rise. They treat it like a punchline, but heaven treats it like preparation. Healing doesn't always require an audience. In fact, some of the most powerful healing happens in silence, away from the noise, away from the opinions, and away from the pressure to explain. In a world obsessed with sharing, posting, venting, and expressing every emotion in real time, there is a sacred strength in keeping some things between you and God. Not everything needs to be broadcast. Not every wound needs to be witnessed. Some scars are formed in the hidden place, where the Spirit works in stillness, mending what no human hand can reach. When you are always talking, always exposing, always explaining, you risk allowing others to interfere with the very process that was meant to purify you. There is a divine intention behind private healing. When you keep your process sacred, you protect it from contamination. Because people will speak from their level of brokenness, not their level of discernment. They will project their fears onto your future, their limitations onto your journey. They may mean well, but they weren't assigned to your healing. That process was designed uniquely for you, tailored by a God who knows your soul's architecture. And when He starts building you back, brick by brick, Sometimes it requires silence so the structure can settle without disruption. You don't need public validation for private restoration. Let God do the work in the shadows before you reveal the glory in the light. Too many people delay their healing by constantly reopening wounds for conversation. They keep sharing the same pain, reliving the same hurt, revisiting the same betrayal, thinking that speaking it over and over will somehow bring closure. But real healing doesn't always come through speaking, it often comes through surrender. There are moments when you must sit still, allow yourself to feel, and let God minister in ways words never could. When your mind is quiet, your soul can hear. When your lips are sealed, your heart can be touched. And when your environment is still, your spirit can be restored. Some of your greatest growth will happen in isolation. It's not punishment, it's preparation. God separates before he elevates. He removes the crowd so he can speak without competition. He closes doors so he can create space for deeper encounters. He lets relationships fall away so he can become your only source. In those seasons, it's tempting to call someone, to vent, to explain, to seek understanding. But those who aren't in tune with your season can't interpret your silence. They'll misread your distance as arrogance, your quietness as weakness, your isolation as failure. But in reality, you're healing in a holy place, a sacred space, a divine process they were never meant to witness. When you heal privately, you also grow deeply. You learn to trust God more than people. You stop needing approval. You stop chasing attention. You stop seeking applause. You discover the beauty of being whole, not because someone affirmed you, but because you allowed God to piece you back together from the inside out. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to show your scars to gain sympathy. You don't need to relive the pain to justify your strength. Just because you've been silent doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to know that some things are too sacred to be shared prematurely. There's a level of peace that only comes when you stop needing others to understand your process, when you stop defending your journey, when you stop explaining your decisions. That's when healing takes root. That's when you breathe again. That's when you walk in rooms without needing to be seen, without needing to be praised, without needing to be understood, because you know who held you when no one was looking. You know who mended the parts of you that were shattered. You know who whispered strength into your spirit when your body was weak. And that kind of healing builds a foundation that cannot be shaken by opinion, by gossip, by misunderstanding, or by rejection. Some people don't want to help you heal, they just want to know why you're hurting. Their curiosity isn't compassion, it's control. They want access to your pain, not to comfort you, but to keep you small, to keep you exposed, to keep you vulnerable to their judgment. There's a twisted satisfaction some people get from knowing your wounds, not so they can apply balm, but so they can whisper about it behind your back. And when you tell them what's breaking you, you give them a weapon they'll eventually use against you. They won't always do it immediately. Sometimes they'll act like listeners. They'll nod their heads. They'll give you a soft smile. But deep down, they're storing your story, rehearsing your weakness, cataloging your cracks, waiting for the moment when they can release it into the atmosphere to strip you of your dignity. It's a painful truth, but a necessary one. Not everyone who listens to you loves you. Some people only come close to gather information. They'll disguise their intentions with concern, but the spirit behind it isn't healing, it's harvesting. Harvesting details, harvesting emotions, harvesting the narrative that makes them feel bigger because it makes you seem smaller. And if you're not careful, you'll start spilling the sacred to people who don't even value your voice. You'll start opening up to those who can't carry the weight of your truth. And in return, you'll find your name being carried into places you never intended it to go. Your pain becomes their entertainment, your struggle becomes their storyline, and your vulnerability becomes ammunition for future attacks. That's why it's so important to learn the difference between a safe space and a sounding board. A safe space will hold your heart with honor. A sounding board will echo your words into places you never gave them permission to reach. And once your story leaves your lips, you can't always control where it lands. You may be looking for relief, but they may be looking for leverage. You may be searching for healing, but they may be searching for gossip. That's why discernment is more important than desperation. Just because you feel broken doesn't mean you should open yourself to everyone who shows up. Not everyone who's present is assigned to your process. When you start recognizing patterns in people, their need to always know what's going on, their tendency to talk more than listen, their inability to keep someone else's confidence, that's not just a character flaw, that's a warning. That's a signal to retreat, to regroup, and to protect what God is doing in your life. Because healing is holy work, and the wrong hands can interrupt what heaven is trying to restore. Sometimes God allows people to show their true intentions so you'll stop casting your pearls before swine, so you'll stop watering dead soil, so you'll stop bleeding in places that were never meant to hold your story. You've got to understand that your story is sacred. Your pain isn't just an experience, it's an assignment. It carries power, it carries lessons, it carries depth. And when you share it with people who lack integrity, you're giving them access to something they didn't earn the right to handle. The enemy loves to plant people around you who look like support but act like spies. They don't celebrate your strength, they wait for your slip. They don't cover your weakness, they highlight it. And when the time is right, they'll pull your past into the present to hinder your progress, to stain your name, and to keep you bound to the image of who you were, not who you're becoming. So hear this, your pain is not public property. Your healing is not up for discussion. Your process is not their entertainment. Protect what God is doing in you. Guard the sacred space where restoration is happening. Everybody doesn't need to know your struggle to witness your strength. Everybody doesn't need to see your scars to believe in your survival. You are not obligated to bleed in front of people who only show up to watch, not to help. The silence that you've been called to isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The stillness you've been walking in isn't avoidance, it's protection. Don't explain what God is still unfolding. Don't rush to reveal what's still being rebuilt. And don't ever forget, the same God who allowed the storm is the same God who is healing you in secret. And when He's done, the glory on your life will speak louder than any story you could ever tell. Keep walking, keep trusting, keep healing in silence, in strength, in purpose.